right now. And I think we're live.
Hello, everybody. We are live for the next Accountability Success Circle webinar. This is our 29th installment. This is amazing. This deserves a round of applause.
Yay!
Right? And this I'm super excited about because change is something that we all go through with. And I'm just going to be honest, it is not easy. And I'm all about processes. I'm all about frameworks. And so this is going to be a good one, y'all. So pull up a seat, get some notes, and get ready to just dive in. So April, you're ready? I'm going to introduce our guest and we're going to get started. So our guest, and I love when we have a guest because no offense, I love April to death, but when it's just me and April, we talk to each other all the time, and this time we get to bring someone else in to hear their wisdom, to hear what amazing things that they have in store for us. And this month's guest is no exception. And Oneita Offield is a renowned iPEC trained and certified life and betrayal trauma coach. Did I say that right?
Yep, you got it.
Oh yeah. And Oneita's she's gonna give us the 411 about her. So I am just going to just say, please join me in welcoming Oneita to the show. Another round of applause, everyone.
I love it.
April.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity being here. And I'm so excited because the community that you have is totally my jam. I'm a mom of 5. One is my foster son. He's 18. He just turned 18, graduated. So he's going to be spreading his wings and flying soon. And that's been a pretty amazing opportunity to be able to have him in our lives. I'm a wife of now 11 years, but we've been doing this thing together for 18 years. This past December marked the tipping point in my life where he's been in my life longer than he hasn't. So that's pretty cool. And I am a women's empowerment and betrayal trauma coach. So what I specialize in is really walking a journey of healing with women who have experienced infidelity in their marriage. So basically, I get to experience and witness some of the most powerful transformations that we have in this human experience. And so while there's a lot of heavy emotion that comes with life, and we have those ups and downs, and I get to be a part of those people's journeys that are really looking for hope and healing and learning how to emotionally regulate, set boundaries, all the things, which is why I'm so excited to be here today, because I think so often we forget those pieces and some of those things that really come up no matter what our life experience is. They can really kind of put some roadblocks there. So I'm excited to talk about all the things. One of my highest values is self-development. So I understand that this community is really big on self-development. So it's totally my jam. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, guys.
Thank you so much for being here. And so this month, as you know, it's the first month of 2022. We are talking about in our community with our theme. For those of you who are in the community, you know that our theme is stability. And for those of you who might be watching outside of the community, we'll definitely talk about what our community does, the Accountability Success Circle. But we wanted to impart some great wisdom to kick off the new year. And, our community is all a lot about accomplishing goals. We, set some goals. We set some plans in place, and then we go and take action. And sometimes we need to have some sort of framework in order to make sure that this change is actually going to happen, right? Because you hear everybody talking about how New Year's resolutions are pretty much over by now. You know, you're in this week where you're about to give up and just wait again until next year, which we don't want to happen, because you know, we're basically going to be on this merry-go-round of just doing the same thing over and over again. And I know Gary says that that's the definition of I just spit up on my own words, but the definition of insanity, right, is you know, you doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so we want you to come out of that cycle and actually make change for yourself. But we also want to do it in a stable way, because you know, we have a lot of people in the community who have experienced burnout, and that's a big source of stress and anxiety and not being happy. And so we want to make sure that we're empowering you to take action in a way that is going to fulfill your life more than hurt it. And so Oneita and I are collaborated on this webinar together to put some words of wisdom in how to actually make those changes in a stable manner. We had a lot of conversation over the last few weeks about what we were going to talk about, and we talked about the importance of almost looking at stable change like how you're building a house. So we're going to break it down using the building a home analogy, so that you can, you know, slowly create that stable change. And there are certain things that you need to do in that process. So we're going to share that process with you today. So we'll get started. If you looked at the bullet points, for those of you who are either watching this on YouTube or saw it in the ASC, there are 3 different kind of stages and phases to building a house. There's the blueprint, where you're kind of creating the structure, but like almost kind of making a plan. And then there's the concrete, where you're actually starting to pour and you're starting to build. And then once that foundation is set up, then we work on some of the inner wiring, and that kind of is the makeup of the whole house. So we're going to use that same analogy to talk about how stable change works. And so we're going to start with the blueprint piece, right? And so this is where we start with an end in mind. You might have a plan, a floor plan. How many rooms? How many bathrooms? How many square feet? And you know, what does the land look like? And how are you going to start to lay the foundation? You want to have some of that stuff ahead of time before you just start building, right? Because you want to make sure, you know, is this going to be, you know, a sound foundation or whatnot? And it's all about creating clarity and focus, really having a plan. And I don't know if those of you who saw Gary and my quickie yesterday, we talked about different ways to kickstart a project, and one of the strategies was to have a plan. Definitely when you're building a house, you want to have a plan set out. But this can be, you know, kind of setting that foundation. And so I like to think about this for those of the people who attended our annual planning retreat in October. This is kind of the blueprint phase, where you're taking a look at, you know, your timeline. You're trying to figure out, what is it that I'm actually going to accomplish by the end of 2022. If you didn't go to the retreat, that's fine, but this is kind of what's involved in that, where, you know, you have this vision of what it is that you want. You have assessed the current situation in terms of where you are, and then had that vision of where you want it to be, and, you know, kind of create that that floor plan, if you will, of what your year is going to look like. Or, you know, you can do it at any point. We just like to do it in October to give us that January to December. And so in that blueprint, there's all of these things that are that you're trying to define and you're getting clarity around. One of the things, you know, especially with stable change, that you want to think about is having, you know, your values defined, right? Because the values can be the basis of everything. And that's something that we also do in the retreat. And so there's all of these different pieces that come into setting that floor plan. And I'm going to actually turn it to Oneita in just a second to talk a little bit more from her perspective about what that blueprint might look like, since those of you in the community already kind of know the lay of the land and what we talk about every October when we're starting to set those blueprints. So Oneita, do you have any additional thoughts on the blueprint and how important that is.
Yeah, a quote that I love that I think about often is that if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace different. And I wish I know who said that, so I'm just going to say unknown. I'm sure all heard it though, and I love that so much because it's so true. And if we don't take a look at the end before, we're just kind of aimlessly wandering instead of knowing exactly what it is that we want. And I ask my clients this all the time: what do you want? Because oftentimes we can identify what we don't want, but that real energy behind creating momentum and change and transformation is really figuring out what is it that I do want and what will my life look like, say 5 years from now. And if you can figure out what you want your life to look like in 5 years, you can then start to reverse engineer and figure out, okay, what do I need to be doing in 3 years in order to get to that? And then 2 years, 1 year. And then you can really focus in on, this is what I need to do this year to make that a reality. And so I love that idea of the blueprint and figuring out all of those things. And you touched on values. And that's one really important thing to get very, very clear on. And one thing that is so helpful in being clear of what your values are is to know when to say no and when to say yes. And it kind of gives you this really beautiful guideline on, or a filter rather, on filtering through, because as you guys are gaining that success and the momentum, there's opportunities everywhere. And so being able to put it through this filter of what are my values, what's most important to me, and what do I want, you can really be able to set those boundaries better for yourself and not be taking on too much, which we'll be talking about in the next point of building that structure for yourself.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of times, we've got people in the community who, a lot of people who are on board with the, having this plan and having it set. Some people are like, I kind of want to wing it. And, we want to give you that flexibility. I think a lot of you know that I talk a lot about having flexible plans because, we can have something like 2020 where you had this plan and then the pandemic happens and then you have to pivot. But I think that, as Oneita was saying, understanding your top values and being able to, say yes to certain things and say no to certain things. I look at values as a way to, it's kind of your compass. It's kind of your decision-making tool. So, Oneita, what are your top values?
My top values are faith, family, honesty, and transparency, kind of go hand in hand to me, connection, and then creativity and self-development. Those are my top. So that's a lot, but they all serve such a huge purpose for me.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people know we talk about values a lot. I've got mine tattooed on my arms and all of that stuff. Mine is fun, accomplishment, connection, authenticity, with secondary flexibility and open-mindedness. And those are the things that kind of help us decide which directions that we want to go. I will always pick something that is more fun than is not fun, right? I will also always tend to say yes to things that are more accomplishment driven than just willy-nilly doing certain things. But I also, like it, I tend to connect with people who are more authentic and, or, like want to live their lives that way and are willing to be more vulnerable as a result. And so when you are having trouble making decisions about certain things, those values can be your guide and your compass. And so it is part of the blueprint because, just like when we're looking at houses, do we decide on, what color is the siding going to be, or, how many floors do we want? What is important to us? Like it can be values. It can also be priorities. What are the types of things that we need to have? Here in Chicago, you have to gun for that attached garage so that you don't have to worry about walking outside, from your car through the cold back into a warm house. And so that value might show up as warmth. But it's the same type of thing. You make those decisions on the blueprint based on some indicators based on who you are. And so that blueprint and having those values are going to be a really, really strong thing. And that's something that we review every time we go through the annual planning process, because it's possible that your values can change over time depending on what's happening in your life. But making sure that you're recommitting to that same compass moving forward. And then, from year to year, you could have values that maybe might not be your top values, that might bubble up to the surface that you want to pay attention to. And so that could also drive what shows up in your plan. Gary, do you have any thoughts that you want to add based on listening to what we've shared so far?
No, I love the point about the foundation, needs to be the values. I agree 110%. When I'm stuck, I tend to lean towards my values, and April, you put it nicely. It's a compass, so it's a way to guide you and help you make decisions. So,
yay! And I know that some people are here with us today talking in the chat. So feel free, if you have any questions or any ahas, feel free to share. And then Gary, I'll just lean on you to share any on the video if there's any good feedback. But hi, everyone. I know that Terry's here, and I think Dee also. So hello to you guys. So that's a blueprint.
John's here.
Oh, John. Hi, John. I didn't see that. Okay, cool. So we've talked about having the blueprint and the importance of that. The next phase is pouring the concrete, or starting to lay down those individual bricks. I don't know if Oneita, you wanna start this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this concept of brick by brick, though. And I talk about this analogy with my clients all the time, and how each little action that we do, whether it seems big or small, it's really contributing to what we are becoming. I literally just had this little bitty piece of nugget that I was able to share with my son the other day, and we were talking about the man that he wants to become. And I asked him, what do you want to become, and how are you getting there? And it was so beautiful what he shared. And he's like, I really want to become more responsible. And he said, one of those ways I'm doing that is, the other day there was dirty dishes in my room, and I came all the way back downstairs. I came all the way downstairs, and I turned around and went all the way back up, and I got that dirty dish and I brought it downstairs. And that one small example is such a good example of what it looks like when we're building brick by brick. And so one of the things that we have on here is slow and steady wins the race. So often we want to get to that end goal of what we want in 5 years right now, where it really takes us learning and stretching and growing and transforming into that person that it takes to be what we want in 5 years. And so that slow and steady wins the race is all about setting very small habits. I don't know if any of you have read Atomic Habits by James Clear. Really, really good. And I love that concept of just super small things that you can do that get you to where you want to be. And so that's one of those first points. So if you want to take it from there.
Yeah. And this is some of, in this phase, if you will, it is all about almost kind of setting up that structure of how you're going to take action. And so, we talk a lot about creating habits and routines. How do we, continue this slow and steady by maybe breaking things down into little chunks, right? Because some of these projects that we have can be a real long process. And when you think about it, that can be super overwhelming. But if you can break it down into little bits and pieces, for those of you who are, interested in writing a book and want to, you can't think about like, well, I'm just going to just keep on writing until I'm done. You've got the blueprint so that in some sense what to write, but you don't think about like, hey, I'm gonna just write and I'm gonna put my hands all in a whole bunch of things. Sometimes that can be like a little too much. You might want to chunk it down into different phases where you start with the manuscript, but then maybe we'll just write one chapter in a few hours and another chapter, and really taking that, those small steps, and thinking about like the small quick wins that you can get right away versus like having to delay your gratification until the book is out. So having those little pieces of wins. And this whole phase is all about avoiding the burnout and the hustle and grind, and making sure that you're having enough breaks, right? Because, when people are building a house, they're not, they're not building the house and nonstop until it's done, right? They're laying that brick one at a time until, the end of the day, and then they take some rest, and then they start it again tomorrow. And so it is having this cyclical nature of, what it takes to start to create this thing that you're going to create, or the project that you're working on. What else comes into play in this phase, Oneita?
Yeah, well, a thought that I have about that break thing, I'm really I love scientific facts. And so I just want to share real quick where I got this from Brandon Burchard. He's one of the top, motivational leaders in this arena. So you probably heard of Brandon Burchard, but he has done a lot of studies, and he shared that in one of the studies that have been done, 50 minutes is about the max capacity, or kind of the sweet spot that we have of the most production that we can do in a sitting. And so if we can set timers for 50 minutes, and then that last 10 minutes, whether you're getting up and stretching or going to the bathroom or getting a drink, whatever, that can really maximize your ability to create more results in your day and have more space, and just really creating white space. So often we're like, I don't have time to eat lunch. I'm just going to eat and work at the same time. Where if we can switch that mindset to really building in those breaks, we're going to find that we're going to have a lot more energy and just creativity to be able to do whatever it is we're sitting down to do. So I love that's a point in here. Another thing is about boundaries and self-care. And that would be one of them. Even setting up a boundary for yourself that says, I'm not going to work past 15 minutes, and I will take a break after that, so that I can let my brain kind of reset and gain some breath there. But that boundaries and self-care is so huge, and taking care of ourselves, because when we don't, we will always create burnout and frustration, and it comes crashing and burning. And it usually comes out sideways, and we're taking it out with our family, or however that comes out. Right. So just really being mindful and aware of what that looks like for us and what our needs are.
Yeah. And some of the other things that you think about in, once we're starting to actually lay this foundation and pour the concrete as part of this, because this is very much the action piece. It's really thinking about what support systems are going to help you move through, right? Because sometimes there might be resistance. I'm trying to come back to this whole house building. It might be raining and thunderstorming one day, and it might slow you down. And it might just mean to either take a break, or is there something where, there's another project that's going on that's competing with or another house that's being built down the street that, resources are being taken away. And how do you put yourself in that position to help push past any resistance or, anything that any challenges that might come along the way when you're starting to build. And it's really thinking about who is in your support system. We talk about the ASC being a support system for many people across the world who are trying to accomplish goals that maybe are, looking for some sort of support, so that they know that they're not alone in this and that they can keep on going. This could be choosing to hire a coach, so that you have somebody to give you checkpoints, because sometimes, things happen in the plan that, sounded good when you were building the plan, but then you might need to pivot because, there's a shortage of supply and we need to think about different things, right? I'm loving this analogy. So it's really thinking about, how are we going to make sure that we don't get stopped in our tracks and have the tools, whether it comes in the support or, just that ability to make different decisions if what happens in the moment as we're executing isn't going according to plan. And so thinking about, not just creating those structures of how you act, but having the support structures in place when you hit roadblocks. How do you get past them? Because I think that's where a lot of people, especially around this time of the year, they tend to get stuck in, okay, well, I wanted to do this thing for 30 minutes a day and I've already messed up and haven't done it for the last 3 days. So there goes that, and I give up and I'm done. What those structures are, those external structures to help you make decisions, help you push past it. That could be that person, it could be a friend, it could be anything, telling you like, hey, don't give up right now. Having that cheerleader in your corner to keep on going, even though what you had expected didn't turn out to, look the way that you wanted it to. And instead of giving up, it could be as simple as a pivot. And I think that that's where a lot of people, when they don't have those support systems in place, they can very easily get discouraged and just give up. Whereas if you have somebody who believes in you and can help you, find a different path, you can definitely, you definitely have a better chance of succeeding and continuing on, even though it might not look like what you had originally intended, but it's still getting the job done. How about you, Oneita?
Yeah, my thought on that, it automatically comes to coaching. And that was a complete game changer for me. And even at this point in the game, I have 3 different coaches. Like the value of coaching is infinite. And I think so often, I don't know how many people in your community are coaches, maybe there's quite a few, but whether you're a coach or not, just understanding the valuable resource that a coach has in your life, because they don't have a bias. They're not too close to the situation, so they can really create space for you to just be able to come and unload or process or think through or set goals or whatever it is. It is like the best thing to have in your back pocket. So that's what comes up for me when you talk about support systems and having that in place.
Yeah. Gary, you have any thoughts you want to share?
Yes, lots of thoughts. First and foremost, want to throw it over to our amazing community that is blowing up the chat. By the way, ladies, you all are crushing it. Everyone's digging all of this stuff. Terry was talking about he loves the brick by brick analogy. Great way to build momentum. And he said it reminded him of that idea of going fast by going slow. Totally agree. And Dee, mentioned in the chat, she said, I learned that by taking breaks and giving myself downtime, like reading book or for fun or playing 15 minutes of a video game, it helps her to get more done. And for me, I want to definitely add that I love, Anita, what you said about creating a boundary around that. Since we're talking about building things, yes, common sense is not always common practice. We can always say, oh yeah, I totally, want to just work 50 minutes and then go and, have that break. And it may make sense. However, when push comes to shove, if you don't have that boundary in place, it's going to be hard when that email comes through, or when you want to keep pushing, even though it's not in your best interest, because your brain cells are being depleted, stuff like that. So I love all of that. And yes, that's my contribution to the discussion.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
So we've talked about the planning / blueprint. We talked about starting to lay that foundation and pouring the concrete. And once that outer shell has been built, we then start thinking about, all right, what about the internal stuff? How do we, we're not just going to live in a brick house, right? There's going to be stuff, right? There's going to be floors, there's going to be ceilings, there's going to be wiring and plumbing. These are some of the things that just help the whole process of the house actually be an actual house. And these are the inner workings. And so I wanted to definitely spend a lot of time on this aspect of creating stable change, because even though it seems to be hidden, it is sometimes the most powerful part of the house, right? Like, I'm in the middle of, Chicago wearing short sleeves, and only because I've got a heater that is functioning and keeping us warm, because it is so cold outside right now, and a heated blanket. But anyways, those types of things that are, embedded into the structure are things that we have to pay attention to, right? When they break, it's very noticeable, right? Like when you're feeling ill, even when we think about our own bodies, when you're feeling ill, it's, there's a bug in your stomach and you're trying to, nurse yourself back to health. And so this is one of the most important pieces of creating stable change, which we're going to talk about in a second. But some of the actual strategies, and I'm going to turn this over to Oneita in a second, but some of the structural things when it comes to creating stable change is making sure that you are monitoring your progress. That's kind of the equivalent. It's really thinking about, how far have I come? How am I feeling about it? Is there anything that I need to do to change? Or is there, are there communication breakdowns or things that are happening that need to be cleared up? This is also, finding time to reflect on, your progress and figure out, am I feeling good and am I satisfied with what's happening, or do I need to make additional changes? Because sometimes with your plan comes additional things, right? With people making their houses, it might have been built a certain way, but then, the new owners come in and they're like, you know what? I really want to have 2 bathroom sinks instead of 1, and that's going to have to change the inner wiring. But it's starting with that process of evaluating what's there and then making decisions on, are there enhancements that we need to make? This could also be, in the world of stable change, do we feel that there are opportunities for us to grow further? And it also takes a lot of, how are we feeling health-wise? How are we feeling emotion-wise? These are the types of things that we need to look at in this phase of creating stable change. And one of the things that I love about when Oneita and I first connected, she has such a great perspective about how emotional regulation works, and how this is it's definitely something that I don't think about a lot personally, because I'm always thinking about, here's how we execute. And yes, I know that, when I'm not feeling great, I have to attend to those, but a lot of times we forget about how important that emotion can impact anything that we're trying to do. So I'm going to turn that over to you, Oneita, to share your yummy goodness.
Yeah, so this is really where I light up, because I think so often, like you said, it is easy to totally miss over that. We don't want to feel the hard feelings. We don't want to do the yuck part of life, and it comes whether we want to or not. And I think that 2020 is an excellent example of that. And this tool that I'm going to share with you guys was developed in 2020, because I myself had a ton of anxiety going on, and I was realizing that it was really crippling me from proceeding forward, just based out of anxiety and fear and the unknown. And so there was a lot of emotions coming up, and I know that's really common for pretty much all of humanity. So this tool that I'm going to teach you guys, it's called Stop, Breathe, Connect, Reflect. And that first piece is stop. And that piece is so important, because so often we want to just push through those emotions. We kind of bulldoze through them, and everything is just kind of pushed to the side so we can continue on. And if you've ever experienced that, or had anxiety attacks or panic attacks, or been completely immobilized by some of these really hard feelings, you know that that's really actually not possible or sustainable. And so this idea of really getting to the point where you can emotionally regulate, it's not about bypassing those emotions. It's about really learning how to sit in them and learn how to pay attention to yourself and what your body is telling you. Because even though I specialize in trauma, we all have trauma of some sort, whether it's big T or little t, there's trauma that's going to come up and it's stored in our body. So the more we can pay attention to that and how our body responds to it, the more that we can nurture ourselves and be able to really start to understand our own experience and meet the needs of ourselves. And pay really good attention to that and start gaining some compassion for ourselves. And it's really going to serve you. So even if you're like, dude, this is not what I want to be, dealing with or talking about, or I want to encourage you to just give it a try whenever you're really feeling some of those hard things come up. And that could look like so many different things. And that could be anything in your marriage. It could be anything, if you're working a full-time job on the side, and just all kinds of stresses and emotions that come up for you. So I wanted to screen share. This might not be the most technologically advanced way of doing this, but I'm just going to flip this around and you can see it on my computer. So I have this tool that if this is of interest to you, you can print this out from my website. So it's called Stop, Breathe, Connect, Reflect. And I just want to give you a brief overview of what it looks like on the computer, because I'm not even sure how well you can see this, but there is that. And then down here, I've got the emotions wheel. So for many of us, we know, like, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy, and just some of those really basic feelings and emotions. So the more we can increase our emotional intelligence and put names to those feelings, the more we're going to be aware of some of these things that are happening, especially when we're talking about triggers. And a trigger is just any stimulus that's coming in that elicits a really high and strong emotional response, or reaction rather than response. And then we go into that reactive mode. And so the more that you can be aware of those and tend to those needs, you can respond a lot more often than what you will do kind of reactive. So I'm going to walk you through that. Now that you've seen it. And I always have my clients print it off, because especially if you experience high anxiety or panic attacks or anything like that, you're not going to remember what you learned from Oneita on the webinar, 3 weeks ago. So if you can print it out and hang it, for most of my clients, it's in their closet. Like, that's just a thing. Even if that sounds weird, it's a total thing. And they'll hang it in their closets, and that's really where they go when they need a minute. And so you'll feel this high anxiety, maybe it's stress, worry, you can't really focus, and you're like, okay, I need to try this tool out. So you're going to stop whatever you're doing, whether it's work, a conversation, watching whatever, grocery shopping. Go off by yourself and just give yourself a moment to disengage from what's happening. And what that purpose does is stops us from just reacting, especially if you're like in a conversation or kind of a high intent situation. And you can just be able to give yourself that space and time to really reflect on what's happening. So then the second part is breathe. So oftentimes when it's like a trauma trigger or anxiety or anything like that, we're often in fight, flight, or freeze, which is really stuck in that limbic portion of our brain. So the emotional portion of our brain that literally can only think, do I fight, or do I freeze? And depending on what your typical response is, that's really where you're at. So you want to give your sympathetic nervous system an opportunity to really calm down. So all this is happening in your nervous system. So your sympathetic nervous system is on fire when you get triggered. And so what you want to do is breathe. That's the second step. So you're going to breathe in for 4 counts and you'll exhale for 8 counts. And so what that does is when you breathe in for 4 and you exhale for 8, you're calming down your sympathetic nervous system and you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the portion that says, hey, we're okay. We're surviving. It's going to be okay. There's nothing coming after this. We don't need to fight, flight, or freeze. We just need to breathe and just be with ourselves. So that's that second part. The third part is going to be connect. So I always tell my clients to put your hand like right on your gut and one on your chest. I'm holding my phone right now, so I can't do it, but one on your gut and one on your chest. And so that way you're really connecting to your body, because your body will speak to you. It will tell you what is happening, what's going on, and you just need to listen to it. So if you connect to your body and then you name a feeling, so you connect a feeling more than just sad, happy, angry, whatever. Connect to it. There's a ton. I'm going to show that to you again. Look at all those feelings that we experience in this human life. And we limit ourselves to such a small range of emotion. And so when we can really start to pick out exactly what we're feeling in this moment, it brings so much awareness and understanding to what is happening and why we are reacting in this moment. So you connect to that. So you're connecting, what is it that I'm feeling? What happened? So what is the present thing that happened that's connecting me to something in the past that's already happened? And what is the feeling that's going on? And where am I feeling it at in my body? So there's a vagus nerve that runs down your body, and you will feel it. You'll feel it in your gut, in your chest, in your throat. Maybe you get a lump in your throat. Maybe your shoulders get really tense, your hands get sweaty. You'll have a visceral response to the triggers that are coming in for you. And so you want to pay attention to what your body's telling you. And then the reflect part is where you reflect and you say, what is it that I need in this moment? And sometimes it's a bath or a drink of water or a hug. Maybe you need that physical touch from someone that says it's going to be okay. So then you're just learning what it is that you need in order to help really calm yourself down and show yourself that you're going to be okay. So in all these steps, we're teaching our brain that we are our person. We're there for ourselves, and we're going to take the time that it takes to listen to our emotions. I always describe our emotions like little children. So if a little child is trying to get your attention, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm busy right now, I can't get to it, like go play with your crayons, like whatever, and you're just continuing to push them off and continuing, they can redirect for a couple of times. But eventually you're going to see that behavior come out, and it's always going to come out sideways. And they're going to have meltdowns, or they're going to make a huge mess of the flour, or they're going to fight with their siblings, like something, some way, those emotions are going to come out sideways. And it's the same with ourselves and our emotions. If we don't start handling our emotions and paying attention to them, they're going to come out sideways. So that is that tool, Stop, Breathe, Connect, Reflect. Again, you can go to my website and print that off if you'd like. It's oneitaoffield.com. And that is, I'll give like a second for reflection if anybody else has any comments.
Yeah, I love this. Hold on, I just gotta get myself back to gallery view. I love this tool, and I particularly love just knowing that this is a tool out there, because I think, I don't know how other people feel, but I usually don't ever think about, and that's why I feel like this webinar coming together was so powerful, is because, I personally talk a lot about, here's how you create a plan, here's how you get it there. And, a lot about the first part and the second part, but I don't always think about this internal wiring and how I'm feeling. I know that emotions are there, but I don't typically tend to think about the fact that, my emotions can be stopping me from creating whatever it is that I want to. I know that they're there, but it's understanding that there is a tool that you can use to help regulate those emotions in the moment, that I think is super powerful. And we often seem to forget that it's all a part of the process, and we want to make sure that those stay maintained, just like like you want to make sure that your plumbing is working, or that your wiring is working, and that all the switches are turning on, and that your heater is going. And, it's some of those maintenance things that you can't forget about, or that maybe you just need to have a regular check-in with yourself to say, how am I feeling? How does this look? And making that a part of the process of creating stable change, because you could be feeling fine, but if there is, any of those empty holes, like if you can pay attention to those more quickly, you may be able to pivot faster if something doesn't feel like a good fit, or something doesn't feel right, and then you can, move in a more stable manner, rather than kind of sitting into it and letting it kind of fester to the point where it almost kind of blows up in your face, and then you have to address it in haste in that moment, and then you have feelings around the feelings of not addressing it sooner. And, we talk a lot about, sometimes people get into these states of overwhelm and they kind of just, they deal with it and, or they tolerate it to the point where it's not, or that it's so strong. Like, and that's why people fall into burnout a lot, because they're like, oh, I'll just tolerate. And then you get to a point where you have to take this break, and then you can't, you aren't able to, you basically shut down for a little bit to then, get yourself into, into that healing place. And that might work for people to just, choose to, I'm going to just work myself until I need that space. But sometimes that burnout happens in a time where you're not ready for it. And then you're harboring the anxiety of like the things that you had in your plan that were going to get done that aren't getting done, because now your body and your mind are telling you, I need a break. And so is it better to, have those periodic check-ins, to check in with yourself, see how you're doing, if you're feeling, and then in those moments where you're feeling a little bit of more heightened anxiety, are you able to regulate yourself faster so that you don't wait until you're already in a place where it's too late, and then you're having like a forced break in a sense, rather than you being in control and you being at choice of when you choose to take those breaks. So that's kind of what came up for me when listening to that tool. Gary, did you have any reflections on your end?
Yes, I did. One of the big things first, going to our crew in the chat, Dee mentioned that she's been learning more about the vagus nerve recently. So it's amazing to have it come up in this webinar. Yes. And the other thing that I wanted to point out, Anita illustrated this very clearly before we got into this, the importance of coaching. I like to look at the coaching relationship like a little safe house where you can practice these things, where you can get better. Because again, like you both mentioned, these things can come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And to have a place where you can practice this and start to build boundaries and, get it wrong and then, just go over so many different ways. That's how we're going, to get better. And regardless if your coaching relationship is something more formal, like, hiring a professional coach, or maybe it's more of a mentorship, or maybe it's, a small community, where you have that psychological safety where you can have these discussions and practice it. It's so important, to do that. So that is, the big thing, for me. And this thing is again, it's so simple, and it's something that, regardless of the trauma response, big T or little t, it's something that we all need in our sort of tool bag, since we're talking about building a house.
Yeah, I love that. No, but yeah, I feel like this is so important to think about. There's so many moving parts, right? And just like everything that we do, we might have some big goals that are in our sight. But if you're a parent, if you're a spouse, if you are working for somebody else, or if you're, you have all of these different hats that you need to juggle. And, a lot of times if you neglect them, they can get a little bit crazy. And then you have to deal with the aftermath of trying to clean those things up. And I definitely have that happening in a lot of the stuff that I was supposed to do in 2021 that I am only dealing with right now. And so, but making sure that, you don't fall into these like places of backlog where then you have to play catch up, because that's not a good feeling to feel. And it doesn't feel stable. It feels chaotic and crazy and, it not positive, right? You want to have those feelings where like, okay, I'm making steady change, and it might not feel perfect every day, but to be able to look at, day by day and saying, I did the best that I could do. Here are maybe some opportunities for growth. Here are things that I maybe need to say goodbye to, but really getting into some sort of healthy spot of reflection, I think is a big piece of the stable change. You can always set a goal, make a plan, and execute on it. But are you really thinking about what's going to set you up for that stability and not the volatility that can come with just running with adrenaline or, those types of emotions. So Oneita, thank you so much for sharing that tool. And we put in the chat a link to download that for those of you that are interested. Or if you're in the community as well, you can send Oneita a message and she can help you get connected on that because she is a part of the ASC. So with that said, I know that we have a little less than 10 minutes left. I just wanted to recap this whole house analogy, right? There's different parts that are that are necessary in order to create stable change. So the first step was the blueprint, laying that foundation, having a plan, having a direction and a compass to lead you where you want to go, having the end in mind, having a sense of where you're going to go in some sort of direction or some sort of compass. Then the second piece is starting to lay that groundwork and the foundation and the structure. So in that structure, you are, figuring out how to take action on the said plan. You are looking at different strategies and ways to keep putting one foot in front of the other, making sure that you have the right support, making sure that you are, managing the project in a way that runs smoothly. And then once you've set that foundation, then it is really looking at the inner wiring to really make the house inhabitable, which is paying attention to maintenance and progress and being in that reflective state and paying attention to things that, impact the outcome, but sometimes are in the background, like your emotions, your health. Those are the things that you need to make sure that you are maintaining in a healthy way and in a great manner, monitoring your strength, doing things, making enhancements to help you resolve things more efficiently, or those types of things, and that becomes your roadmap to creating stable change by making sure that you're paying attention to all of those pieces. Oneita, how about you? Any in the recap, is there anything that you want to make sure that we are remembering, or anything that you want to accentuate for people who may have been paying attention, but they're like, okay, what is the moral of this 1 hour story that we've been sharing the last little bit?
I think you did a great recap on everything and such a great job on pulling in that analogy. And I think that the central message that I'm always telling my clients is to just really have compassion with yourself as you are building this brick by brick. It's not always going to turn out the way you plan. And I love how you had said in the very beginning, like, we can create that plan. We can have the roadmap, we can have the whole thing, but there's going to be hiccups. There's going to be a pandemic. There's going to be like a unplanned baby. I don't know, whatever comes in that is kind of feels like it throws a wrench in it. And then you feel like, gosh dang, now I'm off track by a whole year or 2 years or whatever it is. Just having compassion for yourself and understanding, like, what if the way that things are right now is exactly the way they're supposed to be? And there's something you need to learn and some place you need to grow, or something along the way that is just part of the construction of your house. And it's just the way it's supposed to be. So that would be my final thoughts, is just having compassion for yourself and loving yourself right where you're at.
Yeah. For those of you who are watching live, or even if you're watching this on the replay, I would love for you to, share any ahas or new reflections that came from just listening to this webinar for the last hour, because I think a lot of what we're saying is, can be common sense, but sometimes you need to be reminded about what's important. And, I think that the big goal in terms of what we were hoping to convey today is that, we don't have to work ourselves to burn out every time just to get things done. And there's actually a more productive way to do that. Gary talks about this a lot. too. Just, making sure that you make time for play, in order to, get more things done. And it doesn't need to be this hustle and grind and feeling like very, very heavy. Like, what's the point of living that way? And that's not the philosophy of our community. And so just making sure that like there are alternative ways that you can actually have more fun while you're getting stuff done. And sometimes we just need that reminder that it's not difficult, but it's something that you have to commit to, because it's so easy to fall into the patterns of what society dictates is successful. And we're trying to definitely change that narrative. I wanted to, before I close up, wanted to give Gary any last thoughts, and also check out, see if anybody else has shared in the chat, in the live chat. Any last thoughts, Gary?
No, you all nailed it as usual. Nothing really to add. Just now it's all about the practice. We gave the techniques. Now we just got to go out and play with it.
Yeah. Go play with it. That said, so I just wanted to thank Oneita for joining us on this webinar, number 29. So we're going to hit our number 30 for next month, which we're super excited about. We'll share those dates sometime soon. And if you're just stumbling upon this webinar on YouTube somehow, this is run by the Accountability Success Circle, which is accountabilitysuccesscircle.com. We are a community of awesome adults who are trying to accomplish our personal and professional goals in the most fun, authentic, and successful way. And I think, if you are looking for that support system in that second tier of building your brick by brick house, and looking for that support to help you continue to take action, we are a great resource for you to check us out. So come and visit us, see what you need, let us know how we can support you, and we will absolutely be there. And let's see, we've got some reflections. Do you want to read them, Gary, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'll read the first one by Terry, of course, mentioned, realize all big goals are realized as a result of slow and steady habits and actions. Yeah. And that if you aren't giving yourself time to play or take breaks, you're doing yourself a disservice. Then Dee mentioned that she was really struggling with feeling everything was getting derailed. I feel you. I see you. At the end of last year, a lot of stuff, sort of going on, sort of taking her off her path. I know Dee personally, and I know some of the amazing things she's working on. So I get it. And she finally came to terms with it and realized that she is exactly where she needs to be, even though it's not where she intended. So that is a huge one. And then finally, our buddy John said it took him several years and a pandemic to realize that the whole journey was where I needed to be. And only now is he ready to move forward in a way that is better than he would have done it. So yes, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. And sometimes, sometimes those not so great feeling times are a great awareness indicator of like what we don't want. And sometimes you need to, even though it's sad. I mean, I think about how like 7 years ago, I was like literally balding, and I was not wanting to give up on the stress that I was holding. And, it took losing my hair to be like, okay, this is not the way I want to keep living, and I want to try something different. I would have never thought that I was going to be on this path, but it's so much less chaotic and so much less stressful living this life now. But I had to, have this big, like blaring, like I had to put myself in that position to realize how much I could appreciate like what I really want to do in life. And so we just hope that we impart that with all of you guys, and claim what it is that makes you super happy, And we are, here to help you make a plan to make that happen. So again, Oneita, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Thank you guys all, for those of you who are watching live and who will watch it in the replay. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments on YouTube or in the community, and we will all be keeping an eye out to answer any questions that you have. But let's keep this stability going, keep the momentum going. It's only 3 weeks into the year, and it doesn't need to stop here. And if you feel like you've already fallen off the wagon, let's get you back on track, because you don't need to stop. You can always start at any time and keep going. So, all right. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you on the next webinar or in the community. Come hang out.